last night recitation of Eicha, hard not to notice the drastically different of Megillat Eicha. That the first chapters are descriptive of Yerushalayim sitting alone, devastated, desolate. Verses are somewhat of medium length. Then all of a sudden, the third chapter, you notice that Yirmiyahu moves from the third person to the first person. And he Hagev talks to the first person. Verses are very short. The tune changes also. What's the significance of the shift between the parties? David Foreman explained that the shift represents that the first two prakim is somewhat of Yirmiyahu describing what's happening as an onlooker, as a journalist, photographer. And in the third parak, now Yirmiyahu is broadcasting live, giving him a first-hand report of what's happening to him. It's not just journalism from afar, but it's journalism from literally the place where it's all going down. And in this place, Yirmiyahu is no longer a bystander, an onlooker. He is a participant. He is a victim, and is speaking from his own personal place of pain. And as such, the verses become short to represent as if Yirmiyahu is like gasping for air. It's not as thought out. It's more raw and more personal. And perhaps the same message is true for all of us. As we recite the Kinot, we have to make the transition from being somewhat of a reporter from the comforts of the office to going out into the field and being on site to the place of the tragedy, to experience it firsthand. That Tish'a is a day where we have the challenge is we can read the stories, we can read the Kinot and feel very far and distant. And our job, and hopefully the introductions that were prepared by members of the community, is an effort really to make that shift. I hope that for the process of those who were able to prepare their explanations, it gave you a little more of a personal buy-in, a personal perspective in the Kinot that you're going to recite. And I hope for the community it also gives it a little more of a personal perspective. We're going to start with Kina 6 on page 195, Shava Asuru. Just a very brief thought on the first Kina is that the commentators discuss how the word Shavas, although it means our joy ceased, it also connotes a notion of suddenness. So the idea that Rav Soloveitchik develops in his Kina is that for the Jewish people, and even for Yirmiyahu, they experience the Churban with an emotional experience of suddenness. It happened all of a sudden. But I taught Sefer Yirmiyahu this past year, and it's fascinating because Yirmiyahu's career spans 40 years of warning the Jewish people what's going to happen. And so the question is, how could they experience a feeling of suddenness when it finally happens? And for 40 years, the prophet's been telling them, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Not only that, but the Rav points out that even Yirmiyahu experienced a feeling of suddenness. We read the Haftorah a month or two ago, where Yirmiyahu was told to go buy a field in Anatot, and he leaves his post in Yerushalayim, and the smoke coming out from the Korban Tamid was still going, and when he comes back, he's like surprised to see that the smoke is gone, and he realizes it means the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. Even Yirmiyahu experiences a element of Shavas, that it happened all of a sudden. And perhaps the message is that it informs us of the numbness of the people to his message. For 40 years he's telling them it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And if they were going to experience this Shabbos, it means they really just weren't listening. They weren't able to retain the information. And unfortunately, it's something which I think we can relate to, that sometimes you hear messages over and over, the same message, that it becomes hard to really grasp what's really being said. And the challenge that we need to do is, even though year after year we recite the Kinot, the same Kinot, is try to find a little something. Go off on your own, read some English, find what's meaningful for you, that we shouldn't feel that numbness that we so often feel when reciting the Kinot. Kina Shabbos Suru begins on page 195. Shabbos Suru.
Tavol Sar Shekilanu Limlo Hamad Beteman Nihalanu Allah Lacha Bechaber Ilanu Zahinu Bachor Betulak Kavalanu Rama Bedna Mchachulanu Zechora Adonai Mihayalanu.
We turn to page 217, the Kina Eicha Atzta. In the third stanza, we'll read the words V'lo zacharta viud vetek veses. We asher v'yata leviudecha, which is translated as, we ask Hashem, how can you not remember the assembly place you designated for your followers? What is this assembly place? It presumably refers to the Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Medrash, the Shul. I'd like to share part of an essay Rav Soloveitchik wrote about the idea of the synagogue in an article written entitled The Synagogue Institution Idea. The Rav writes, why does halacha require a house consecrated to prayer? It must be understood that even a yachid individual should try to say his prayers in the synagogue. Why is that necessary? It is not the physical structure which is important. It is not so much the roof and not so much the big galleries and high windows. These are not important. You know, we've never cared about the architecture of the shul. People speak a lot about it nowadays, but the halacha was not concerned. What is important according to halacha is something else. Bayit in Hebrew has a double connotation. Bayit means a house, the physical structure, four walls, a roof, a floor, and bayit means a home. We err when we translate Beit HaKnesset as the house of prayer. This rendition is not true. There's no need for a house of prayer because I can pray to God and I can kneel to Him and have a rendezvous with Him anywhere on the globe, even on the outskirts of the universe. I'm confronted with God everywhere. Beit HaKnesset is not a house, but a home of prayer. The structure is symbolic. Beit HaKnesset, if understood as a house of prayer, is an institution. However, if translated as a home of prayer, it turns into an exalted idea, namely, the home of man, of homeless man, which is at the same time the home of God. When King Solomon, when he dedicated the temple, he asked a pertinent question. Ki amnam yeshev Elokim al haaretz nei hashamayim u'shmei hashamayim lo yichal kalucha. Afki abayit hazeh asher banita. Hashem's home, how is Hashem going to dwell on earth? Behold, the whole heavens can't contain God. How much so can a little structure that I have built? And what's the answer to this question? The Beis Hamikdash is not the home of God, but the home of man, where he keeps an appointment with God. It's a very powerful line. The shul is not the home of God, but the home of man, where he keeps an appointment with God. God does not need a home for himself. God feigned homelessness in order to induce man to build a home for man. And whatever name is assigned to this home is to be understood in terms of human, not divine. Homelessness. It is the home of God because the home of man. God comes to that house in order to keep his appointment with man. When we talk about Kadosh Baruch Hu not remembering the assembly place, perhaps we're also reminding ourselves, have we remembered this idea? Have we remembered our assembly places? The shuls. The shuls are also our homes. The notion that the shul is a home for us, a place that we should be comfortable. And maybe in this kina where the refrain is Zechor Hashem Mehayolanu, we're also reminding Hashem, not just he didn't show up, the unanswered prayers, but also remember what happened at our meeting places, at our shuls. This year, as you mentioned last night, what happened in Pittsburgh, what happened in Poway. Zechor Hashem Mehayolanu. Remember what happened to us. And let's try to make our shuls feel a little bit more like our homes. Eicha Atzav Apcha, page 217.
תנו לשפוך המים עמה ביום זה נספינו פעמיים זכי ויוסי יושבס ושבה בירושלים נגנתי ועתה עד חוג השמיים.
The eighth kina al Chug HaShamayim starts on page 237. In the third stanza of this kina, the Paitan Rav Kalir makes reference. The line says, "Agarabi kol b'nei bayit." I will, which the Quran translates as, "I will provoke the angels to ally themselves with me," which is not the literal read of that pasuk. Agareh, reverse. Agareh bi kol bnei bayit. I will provoke or stir up my entire household. Rav Soloveitchik in his commentary tells us that this line is telling us that we have a responsibility to try to inspire or teach our entire families about what the Churban was about. The Rav makes a connection to Sipar Yetziat Mitzrayim. He says, just like on Pesach, we have a responsibility to try to educate our kids what Yetziat Mitzrayim was all about. On Tish'a B'Av, to the best of our abilities, we have to try to educate our families and our children on whatever level they are about what this day is all about. Which, by the way, gives us something to think about for those with little children. What are you going to do the rest of the day? Find a few minutes to try to describe why is it that, mommy and daddy aren't eating today? Why is it that we're not doing the same activities we would usually do on a Sunday afternoon? Rav J.J. Schachter points out in one of his shiurim that I had the zchut to go to, that it's also taking place in Teaneck. For those who want to go later, it's a nice opportunity if you have to go. He quotes the Gemara Bava Kama, and the Gemara Bava Kama in Daf Nun Tes tells the story of Eliezer Ze'era. Havim sayim v'sanei uchme v'kai b'shuka d'narda. Gemara tells us Eliezer Ze'era would wear black shoes and go into the marketplace of Narda. Ashkuchu de Bei Reish Galusa. And the house of Reish Galusa saw him and said, Maishna hani misanai, why are you wearing black shoes? Apparently back then no one wore black. They wore a lighter colored dress. Amar Lahu de Kama Ablina Yushalayim. He responded to Reish Galusa, I'm wearing black because I am mourning over the temple's destruction. Amrulei, Reish Galusa said back, At chashivat lit abule Yushalayim. Are you chashiv enough? Who are you to mourn the destruction of the temple? Savar Yua Rahava. They thought that Elazar Zeira was acting in a pompous way, in a haughty way, that he was someone special. And the Gemara goes on to describe literally a faher, where Eliezer Zeira is asked questions to prove his righteousness, see what he knows, whether he's worthy enough to be mourning for the loss of the temple. I heard recently on the podcast headlines, it may have been an old podcast, but David Lichtenstein was asked by one of the followers, one of the people who listens to the show, who are you? He's a businessman, to be sharing Torah. I don't remember the exact mashal he gave. It was a beautiful mashal. If anyone remembers it, remind me. But he basically said, in 2019, who else is trying to defend the Torah? Who else is trying to spread Torah? The level that we have today, as you read us at Doros, we're just not on the level we once were. We don't have the same amount of professionals maybe who can articulate in as clear or modern or contemporary as a way as we once had. And I think the same thing is true when it comes to mourning the loss of the temple. I don't feel fit. I'm sure all the other people are going to come up here and try to share insights. I'm sure they don't feel fit. But who else is going to do it? Maybe there's a time historically where Eliezer Zeira had to take a faher to prove his worthiness. But today we have a responsibility that if we're not going to attempt to learn about the Churban, then no one will learn about the Churban. And I think the same is true when we think about trying to educate our kids. We might not have the right words. We might not know how to approach describing what exactly Beis Hamikdash was. But if we don't try, who's going to teach them? The 8th Kina ad de Archug HaShemayim on page 237.
ישראל מאית ותרחי לו הלכו ועזבוני ועזבתי ולפני מהם נהפכו והגנתי והעלתי מאי ולבי משפחו איכה תפארתי מרשעותי ישליכו.
The ninth Kina begins on page 255. Eicha tif'arti mirashutai hishlichu. How they have hurled my glorious crown from my head. There was an article I came across this past week. It was actually written by Rafi Abramson's father, Dr. Henry Abramson, who is a historian. Been sending out these, he wrote this in, I found it in JTA, but he's writing for the OU, also for the Daf Yomi, giving some historical perspective in the Daf Yomi as of late. Fascinating historical insights. And in this Kina, we're about to write one of the refrains we're going to see. In the second refrain, it says, Sechi umos samani, which comes from the Megillah. We read it last night. He has made me filth and refuse. Well, Sechi umos, he has made me filth, also is a reference to the anti-Semitic tropes that we hear. I'm going to read from this article something I didn't know about. It was fascinating historical documentation. There was a gentleman by the name of Eisenmacher, Menger, who, I'll read the article. Eisenmenger belonged to the class of insects which sucks poison even out of the flowers. The 19th century Jewish historian Heinrich Gretz wrote. Gretz was referring to Johann Andreas Eisenmenger, a young 17th century scholar from Mannheim, Germany, who dedicated 19 years of his life to mastering the Talmud and presenting himself to the Jewish community as a prospective Ger Tzedek. He learned Hebrew, Aramaic, and even Arabic during his intellectual journey and read the whole Talmud roughly 3 times. In 1700, Eisenmenger published Judaism Unmasked, one of the most noxious and highly influential anti-Semitic works ever written. During the 9 days leading up to Tish'a B'Av, during which Jews commemorate the saddest moment in Jewish history from the destruction of the temple, the deportation of the Jews of Warsaw, we have again witnessed Eisenmenger's contemporary descendants, gunmen who publish paranoid, hateful manifestos before embarking on horrific acts of random violence. Those specifically targeting Jews, such as the shooters in Poway and Pittsburgh, often rely consciously or otherwise on the work of Johann Andreas Eisenmenger, who I had never heard of until I saw this article. It was fascinating. I don't know if you saw in the news, but someone who had gone on a date, a young woman who had gone on a date with the shooter, I think it was in Dayton, that the mass murder just last week in Dayton last Saturday night or wherever it was, said that on the first date, she went on a date with the shooter in college or wherever it was, and he was showing her films, video, of a play-by-play of how the shooter in Pittsburgh was able to mass murder the Jews in the Tree of Life synagogue. So you think, to some extent, what happened in Dayton, Ohio, outside a bar, a non-kosher restaurant, what does that have to do with us? But oftentimes, these Rishayim, they're putting these manifestos on dark parts of the web, spewing hate. And if it's not hate for the Jews overtly, but it's hate for the other. And we're the other. And apparently, historically, a lot of it stems, at least with the anti-Semitic tropes, to this Eisenmenger. Dr. Abramson writes, spanning 2,000 pages over 2 brick-like volumes, it's an exhaustive survey of every possible passage from the Talmud could be distorted to reflect badly on Jews. His intent was to prove how the stubborn Jews frightfully blaspheme and dishonor the Holy Trinity, despise and curse the uttermost extreme of the whole of Christianity. He also promised ridiculous and amusing stories to bout, written for the honest information for all Christians. Eisenmenger's purpose and even methodology were hardly new. Jew-haters have been mining the Talmud for talking points since the 13th century, when the apostate Nicholas Donin, we'll hear about later on, first denounced before the Pope, Innocent III. Few, however, were able to penetrate the depths of this massive ancient text written in a mixture of highly coded Aramaic and Hebrew. But Eisenmenger was different. He realized the only way to seriously understand the Talmud was to become immersed in the world of the yeshiva, a closed world to non-Jews. To achieve his dark purpose, Eisenmenger had to present himself as a genuine spiritual seeker, perhaps modeling himself like Onkelos. He began his lifelong deception in 1680 at the age of 24. By this time, he was ready to bring his malicious book to print. By the time he was able, Eisenmenger could count many rabbis among his teachers, including the then Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Amsterdam. News of Eisenmenger's colossal betrayal leaked out before Judaism Unmasked was released. The Jewish community tried to persuade the emperor that its publication might ignite the popular violence that had plagued the region in earlier years. Eisenmenger protested, a lengthy court battle ensued, and eventually, in the middle of negotiations, Eisenmenger suffered a stroke and died at the age of 50. And the work became public record. Dr. Abramson writes, as a historian of the Jewish people writing during the 9 days, I find myself awed by his pathological achievement for 2 reasons. First, whatever we think about the sick individual, he devoted himself to an overwhelming tour de force of twisted scholarship, nearly 20 years of solitary toil, exhaustively infiltrating an alien community in order to produce such a massive publication. But like Retz, secondly, it's hard not to reflect on how Eisenmenger was able to suck poison even out of flowers, twisting and distorting the Talmud in such a hateful manner. Living in the Jewish community, seeing the beauty of Judaism, and knowing that people say terrible things about our people, Sechi umos samani. He has made me filth and refuse. And we're seeing it again and again in our own lives. Kina 9, Eicha Tifartim, page 255.
אך אני לוקד ויוחש יקרון אבא שמחה וישבי חרון הארץ ישב וגב יקרון איכה ישוח חלצר השרון.
We're going to skip now to Kina 11, which is on page 289. This Kina is a lament that Yirmiyahu, the prophet, wrote for Yoshiyahu, who was the king at the beginning of Yirmiyahu's career. And the Kina is significant that Yirmiyahu is lamenting the death of Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu, if you remember, became king at a very young age, at 8. And unlike his predecessors, he kind of turned things around. He made it his business to try to eradicate Avodah Zarah from Eretz Yisrael. In fact, Yirmiyahu and Yoshiyahu actually, Rashi tells us, they reunified the two different Malchut, Yehuda and Yisrael. They were able to bring everyone back together in a unified way. Yoshiyahu famously is killed when the army of Egypt is trying to get across Israel to pass through, and they ask for a safe passage, and Yoshiyahu does not allow them. Based on the pasuk in Devarim, it says, in times of shalom, afilu cherev shel shalom lo yavor. Even a sword that is not intended to hurt you, but is just passing through, will not need to go through your land. That's the promise. Yoshiyahu thought that he had eradicated all Avodah Zarah, and he thought that he was living in a time where the promise in Sefer Devarim would apply. Unfortunately, Meforshim explain that the people were deceptive in where they hid their Avodah Zarah. They hid them on the doors and the entranceway behind their doors. So when Yoshiyahu had sent his guards around to the homes to find the Avodah Zarah and to destroy it, the doors, when they were open, when they would come in, no one knew what they were. It was only when they closed, they would form some sort of image of Avodah Zarah, and the guards didn't find them. And Yoshiyahu, unfortunately, is killed, perhaps for not being as in touch with the people. He thought the people were on board with what he was trying to do, and they were not. And upon his death, Yirmiyahu laments that in every tragedy we should always also remember the death of Yoshiyahu, which is somewhat strange. We don't really know that much about Yoshiyahu. I mean, how many of us here, if you not have learned Sefer Yirmiyahu, really know that much about him? What was so special about him? So first of all, it was really the last hope in Yirmiyahu's lifetime of avoiding the crisis of the destruction of the temple. Yoshiyahu was the last of the good kings. All of his children really weren't able to too much good. And in fact, when Yoshiyahu is killed, Yirmiyahu hears the last words where Yoshiyahu pronounces Tziduk Hadin. Basically, Yoshiyahu said, Hashem Tzadik Upi Mariti, that I have rebelled. And Yirmiyahu, upon hearing those words, says, he is the Mashiach Hashem. Which is interesting, because he's dying, but Yirmiyahu is referring to him as the Mashiach Hashem. So I remember once, I told my students this year, but I don't think I've shared it here, I never understood the whole idea of Lubavitcher Rebbe. How can Lubavitcher Rebbe, if he died, be the Mashiach Hashem? So I remember once in Svat meeting a Lubavitcher, and I asked him, if you believe Lubavitcher Rebbe is dead, so how could you refer to him as Mashiach? And what he clarified for me, I don't know if this is the official Chabad policy, but it resonates with me, and for those who are not Meshachistim, what he said is that Lubavitch doesn't believe that the Rebbe is Mashiach. Lubavitch believes that the Rebbe, in every generation, there is someone who is appropriate to be Mashiach Hashem. The question is whether or not the people are eligible or appropriate to have Mashiach come. You could have the individual, and sometimes in history we had the individual, but we didn't have the nation being deserving of Mashiach. And I think the same idea of Mashiach, the way that Chabad, some Chabad might view Lubavitch Rebbe as having been on that level, is really the same thing that Yirmiyahu was lamenting over Yoshiyahu. That Yoshiyahu, when Yirmiyahu said he's the Mashiach Hashem, it means that unfortunately it was another situation where we had the person, the individual was on the level of being the Mashiach. But unfortunately the nation was far from being on that level. And that's why after Yoshiyahu's death, the snowball effect happened, and next thing you know, we end up with Churban. By Konen Yirmiyahu al Yoshiyahu on page 289.
Eicha Kinot, Subata Mechodi, Tish'a Mechodi, Samosiki Ladiadi, Rashati Venasati, Venitashadi.
We're going to skip now to Kina 13 on page 315.
In Kina 13, the author poetically deconstructs the word Eicha into two monosyllables, A and Ko, thus changing the meaning of the word from how to where is the Ko, meaning where are the promises that Hashem made to the Jewish people, those promises that included the word Ko. The word Ko is present in numerous promises that Hashem made to the Jewish people throughout Tanakh. The poet finds that the frequently found word Ko, appearing to be superfluous in those sentences, actually represents a unique connection to the Jewish people and Hashem. Kinot 13, Eicha.
Eikot Shuas Asameyotzar, Vichol Amar Shel Lachuzim Natzar, Vihina Tufu Ferachai B'chatzar, Ad Matai Elohim Yecharech Tzar.
Going to now move to the 16th Kina. 360.
Kina 16 is composed by Rav Elazar HaKalir, like many of the other
kinos that we read today. It is structured according to the parak of Eicha, which, unlike the other prakim, is not an alphabetic acrostic, though it does contain 22 psukim, like most of the other prakim. And it picks up on each first word of the pasuk, and the kina create the stanza for starting off from that word. The kina itself is describing the destruction of the second base of Mikdash, which is discussed in detail in the Midrashim, as well as the Gemara in Gittin. The destruction begins, the Gemara itself discusses how Vespasian becomes anointed as the Caesar, and eventually his son Titus is the one who carries out the actual destruction. So the Gemara and the Kina highlight certain things that Titus did. It begins off with his entrance into the Beis Hamikdash, and Titus took a sword and stabbed the Parochas, which, as a miracle, spouted forth blood. So, Titus thinking and symbolizing that Kiviyachol, in some sense, he harmed God, and then continues with the various defilements that he committed within the Beis Hamikdash. He brought a harlot into the Beis Hamikdash, took the parochas that he had stabbed, and gathered all the kalim and used it as a sackcloth to take out his spoils. There's discussion in the Kina also, which the Gemara discusses as well, of 400 children that were brought on a boat taken from Yerushalayim to Rome, meant for moral purposes, and the girls of the ship realize what's happening. They jump off, kill themselves, and then the boys follow suit. But an interesting stanza that I wanted to just discuss for a couple of moments is towards the end of the Kina. It's discussing the actual destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So this also is based on the Gemara in Gittin. And the Gemara says that Titus he appointed 4 commanders to destroy the walls, and 3 of them accomplished their goal, and the 4th, on his own volition, decided not to. And he explained to Titus the reason he wanted to do this is so that even though they're going to destroy the entire Beis Hamikdash, there should be some remnant, some remaining structure so that people should remember what it is that Titus did. Titus accepted this, but because he didn't listen to his command, um, set an example for the other soldiers and commanders. He commanded this general to go to the top of the wall that was remaining and jump off, and he did so and died. And obviously, this wall is what we know as the Kotel, as the Western Wall. So I'll just read the stanza itself. It says, Al petach har habayis echel lavo. So he approached the gate of the Harabayis. Biyad arba'a roshei hafsirav ahacharivo. That he handed it over to four generals. This is Titus appointing the four generals to destroy. Al tzad maravi lezecher hisrid bo. But on the western wall, he remained. He left as a remnant for a commemoration, for a remembrance. The tzad achar kaslenu. He stood behind the wall below Rav Rivo, and he didn't fight. He didn't defend his cause. So, a plain reading of the stanza refers, as we were discussing, to Titus. And Titus himself decided, or a commander decided to leave it standing and didn't finish the job, so to speak. But another way of reading it, which the Koran here translates, and the Rav discusses in his commentary, is that at least the second part of the stanza is referring to God, and that as a commemoration, God decided that there should be something left, some remnant left, and that is the lo Rav Rivo means that even though, as the Gemara says, and we see in multiple places that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have taken out his vengeance on the Jewish people, but instead took it out on bricks and stones on the building. He decided to absolve the Kotel, the Western Wall, of this I guess judgment, and that is what remained. So even though the Kina itself is discussing horrific things and destruction, there is some silver lining, which is that there is still a remnant left of the Beis Hamikdash, which we have as the Kotel. And in fact, the Rambam discusses their halachic ramifications. The fact that Hashem is somewhat still there and there's still some Kedusha involved, halachically, potentially we could still bring korbanos in certain contexts according to the Rambam. And this is based on this fact, the fact that the Kotel remains. So while we are commemorating and sitting today in a Veilus for the destruction, um, there is still, but Kadosh Baruch Hu decided to leave a little bit, and not everything was gone, and we have something to hold on to. So even though we should sit and think about and contemplate destruction, we should remember that there still is some hope.
כי תרמוס באו עד נפשן, כוזוס בסנו ולא שכנוך אפילו ממשן. נקבע סמנו למשיבים ולבשן, ובסקו נשמעה, ובעלה מתישן.
Kina 17 on page 375.
The most horrifying thing I've ever read in my life was a speech given in 1942 in the Lodz Ghetto by the leader of the Lodz Ghetto, Chaim Rumkowski. I trust from the time period and location you can figure out most of the context, but the more immediate context is that Rumkowski had been ordered by the Nazis to hand over Jews to them to bring to the death camps, and until this point he had been giving them old and infirm people in the belief that giving away these people would allow the rest of the ghetto to survive. But he had run out of the old and infirm. So he got up in front of the Lodz Ghetto on September 4th, 1942, and he said, "The ghetto has been struck a hard blow. They demand what is most dear to it, children and old people. I was not privileged to have a child of my own, and therefore devoted my best years to children. I lived and breathed together with children. I never imagined that my own hands would be forced to make this sacrifice on the altar. In my old age, I am forced to stretch out my hands and to beg. Brothers and sisters, give them to me. Fathers and mothers, give me your children. Yesterday, in the course of the day, I was given the order to send away more than 20,000 Jews from the ghetto. And if I did not, we will do it ourselves." The question arose, should we have accepted this and carried it out ourselves or left it to others? But as we were guided not by the thought how many will be lost, but how many can be saved, we arrived at the conclusion, those closest to me at work, that is, and myself, that however difficult it was going to be, we must take upon ourselves the carrying out of this decree. I must carry out this difficult and bloody operation. I must cut off limbs in order to save the body. I must take away children, and if I do not, others too will be taken, God forbid. The thing that horrifies me so much is I don't know if I can blame him. He was faced with the choice of giving away 20,000 people or the Nazis taking that themselves. He did not know that none of this would work. He did not know that the entire ghetto would be liquidated in the end. In his eyes, he thought he was saving as many people as he could. What does that do to a person? What kind of, image of reality does that give to a person where they have, given away 20,000 people to death? Our Kina opens with a gut punch of an image. Im telchalna nashim piryam. If women will eat their children. Think about this. Most Kinot are about things that are done to us, things that happen to us. This is about what we did to ourselves. We were put in situations where horrible choices were necessary, and we made them. And, I'm a firm believer that nobody can judge things that happened in the Holocaust. People were put into horrible choices. But those choices do things to a people. Under pressure, calculuses were made. I need to stay alive, but I'm starving, and if I could just... I need to keep the ghetto alive. If I could just... Those choices are now without consequences. Suffering is not ennobling, it is corrosive. Morality is eroded, empathy is hardened, sensitivity is lost. So when you read this Kina, I ask you to allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to, we've gone through a lot of things in these Kinot, and it has a desensitizing effect over time of, this horrible thing happened, this horrible thing happened. Read this Kina and allow yourself to feel horror. Read this Kina and allow yourself to feel that even though this choice may have been, justified at the time, something was lost in our psyche, something was lost in our moral compass. And try to get yourself back to the point where you have empathy, where you have moral sensitivity. And hopefully that's where we're at the end of Tish'a.
ברוח הקודש למראים אוי על כל שכני הרעים משהו קרה מודיעים בית אשר עשו לא מודיעים אם תלכן אנשים פריים משמיעים אם יהרה במידש אדוני כהן ונביא לא משמיעים.
To go now to Kina 19, L'cha Hashem Atzdaka on page 393.
Hashem Atzdaka
Lanu Boshet Hapanim is a familiar turn of phrase. You may recognize it from Slichot and from Tachanun. It means that to you Hashem is righteousness, and for us is shamefacedness. I heard from Rabbi Daniel Yalkut in Pittsburgh that the origin for this phrase comes from I think it was in Parshas Eikev maybe, where later on in Sefer Devarim, when Moshe is describing going down from Har Sinai, carrying the Luchot to see the Jews as they are worshiping the golden calf. Moshe says that the flames were still bright at my feet. And the Midrash stops to think, what is that fire? Oh yeah, that was the fire from Har Sinai. The Jews committed this sin literally at Har Sinai, while Moshe was still up at the top, while the light show was still going on. There was still fire, and you think, how could it possibly be that they are experiencing this level of divine revelation and they're still going to do the sin? And the Midrash says that even then there was still man falling, that Hashem was still sustaining them even during that time when God knew that they were rebelling and they were committing this terrible Aveirah. The Kinna that we're going to read kind of goes through a number of different examples of how even while we're doing an Aveirah, when someone or a story is being told where someone commits this terrible sin, still yet Hashem sustains us, and it's sort of a backwards kind of a logic, where any Aveirah that you could think to do, somehow you're taking something that Hashem gave you or that Hashem provided, and you're using it to sin, to go against God. A person could sin with his body. God gave you the body. A person could sin with his money. God gave you the money. Everything we have is from God, and any sin that we do, any choice that we make going against God, therefore it comes back to L'cha Hashem Hatzdaka V'lanu Boshet Hapanim. That even as we turn away, Hashem is still providing for us. And maybe that's something to think about on Tish'a B'Av, that we're hearing about and reading about all these terrible things that happen to us.
Sometimes things that, as we've just heard, we've had to do to ourselves, and it just that phrase Lacha Hashem Hatzdaka. Even as we commit a sin, even as we are shamefaced, Hashem is still righteous, and something to think about today.
Describes the 10
martyrs, the great sages who were killed by Hadrian after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the 10 sages of the Mishnah. There's discussion whether or not they were all executed at the same time. Historians say they did not necessarily all live in the same time, but at least the descriptions of their death are all based on various Gemarot, Midrashim. I want to focus on one of the descriptions that describes the death of Reb Hanani ben Tradio. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah and Yud Ches says there was a debate. The Romans had made it law and passed an edict that you weren't allowed to teach Torah. There's a debate between Reb Hanani and Reb Yossi ben Kisma. Reb Yossi said, "My dear brother, don't you know the nation, the Romans, which was a sign by heaven, has destroyed the temple, massacred the finest elements of Jewish people, and yet you continue to study Torah and go about carrying a Torah scroll." And Reb Hanania said, "Hashem Yirachim." And Reb Yossi said, "I fear that you will be burned together with the Torah scroll." They were having a debate whether or not we should continue to teach Torah at the threat of death. And Yochanan ben Tradim was caught teaching Torah and he was sentenced to burning. And the Roman executioner wrapped Yochanan in his Torah scroll, planning to set him on fire. The executioner placed the wool soaked in water on his heart in order to prolong the burning. Yochanan's daughter cried out, "Father, woe is me that I live to see this." And he said to her, if I were being burnt alone, that might have been difficult, but now that I'm being burnt with a Torah, I feel much relieved. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is concerned with the dignity of the Torah, will also concern himself with my pain. At that moment, the Gemara tells us, Rabbi Hanani ben Tradion's Talmidim asked him, "Rebbe, what do you see?" And he replied famously, "I see the parchment of the Torah scroll burning, and the letters of the Torah written on it soaring off." And it's a Gemara which we've heard probably for a young age. In the Sefer Torah Tavlin on Tish'a B'Av, he quotes that some commentators saw a profound lesson in the story. An impassioned debate had long been raging between Reb Hanani ben Tradio and his disciples. Was the struggle to learn and teach Torah worldwide worthwhile? The disciples maintain it normally made sense to continue struggling, as even if the floaters might perish, the ideal would remain. In that scenario, however, they maintained the struggle with the Romans was futile, because not only were the Romans planning to annihilate the idealistic fighters, they also want to destroy the Torah itself. And the Talmidim told their Rebbe, stop teaching Torah. It's not worth it. And Reb Hanani, the great Torah disseminator, disagreed with his disciples. He said, even if the bearers of the Torah perish, the Torah itself will live on. In the final moments of his life, as he lay there burning together with the Torah scroll, his disciples continued discussion, wanting to hear what the Rebbe would say then. Their question, what do you see now, Rebbe, is not to be taken literally. They meant to imply that they had been right all along, that because the teacher was being burnt together with the Torah, his ideal, the struggle had not been worth it. Rabbi Hananiah quickly answered the disciples and said, no, children, you are mistaken. The ideal cannot be burned. Only the parchment is burning, but the letters are soaring off. Rabbi Hananiah was informing them that many new generations of Jews will arise who will catch the flying letters and carry on the Jewish ideal of Torah study. Today, after millennia of torture, we are the proof that Rabbi Hananiah ben Shradyom was right, and that the Torah is eternal. This past week, we learned of the murder of a yeshiva student, Devir Sorek, who was learning in Hesder Yeshiva in the Gush, and he was found with multiple stab wounds in the Gush region, and his body was found outside of the settlements of Migdal Oz and Efrat. And Rabbi Brander, in the New York Times article, described that Private Sorek had gone to Yerushalayim on Wednesday, this past week, to buy gifts to thank his Rebbeim. It was the end of the Zman, last day of the year. Thursday was the last day of the academic year. And one rabbi had asked for the new David Grossman novel, Life Plays With Me. On the bus back to Yeshiva, Private Sorek called his study partners Chavrusa and said he would be there for their regular 8:30 Chavrusa. And of course, Private Sorek did not show up as promised, and his body was found in the middle of the night near Migdal Oz, clutching the Grossman novel and Svarim that he had planned to give to various Rebbeim. And apparently, this Private Sorek, when he was an infant, his grandfather, Rabbi Binyamin Hurling, was also the victim of a terror attack. He was killed when Palestinians opened fire on a group of Israelis who were hiking Harival near Nablus. And of course, the imagery of Private Sorek coming back in the last day of Zman, bringing Svarim, books for his Rebbeim, gifts. We know, anyone who's learned in yeshiva, the imagery of Ben Torah clutching holy books and being murdered, literally found with the books in his arms. That imagery speaks to all of us. The idea that the letters are flying in the air, and it's up to the rest of us to grasp the letters and to continue the legacy of Rav Chanan ben Tradion, of Asara Haruge Malchus, and now to remember Devir Sorek, Hashem Yimkom Damo. Arzel Vanon on page 450.
Ita b'nei Adonai v'losivot li'Yisrael Meitzvir Kayim Koshlot Chelek Yaakov u'Moshiach v'Yitzhak V'tzedek Yimach Melech V'shalmu Yemei Avleich V'Ro Nisa V'Neleich.
Kinot 22, we get on page 425.
So, Kinot 22, like the previous one, Arzei Halavanon, are the shift from the Kinos talking about the Churban in specific and moving on to the other tragedies that have happened to the Jewish people over the millennia. And this one specifically, and one coming up also, are referring to the massacres of the communities in Germany during the Crusades in 1096, specifically Mainz, Speyer, and Worms. And there are kind of two levels to kind of look at specifically within this Kina. The Kina itself talks about some pretty gruesome situations that people would find themselves in. The decision of whether to commit suicide and to kill your own children to save them from torture or forced conversion. And just as a human being, as a parent, just like some previous keynotes, they're gut wrenching to read. And aside from that terrible kind of personal individual tragedy, another deeper layer to kind of look at in terms of the destruction of these communities in Germany is to think about not what was lost in that moment in terms of the people specifically, but in terms of the future, not just in future of people, but in terms of future of Torah learning. The communities in France and Germany are known to be where Rashi and Tosfot have come from, and to give some historical background, the communities in Germany of Mainz, Speyer, and Worms were the centers of Torah learning, and they started before France. So we all know Rashi's from France, but Rashi went to Germany to learn from the Tosafists. And what we have now, though, we have in our own Gemaras are mostly the commentaries of the French, the French rabbis, which is again Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, and the other French Tosafists, because the German community was completely destroyed. France was affected by the Crusades, but Germany, the German communities were completely destroyed. And there's one line specifically towards the end of the keynote that refers to, the author asks, how are we going to be interpreting Nazir and Nadarim? And it's an interesting and seemingly random thing for the for the author to reference. Those are two. There are a lot of other pieces of the Torah, in the commentary in the Koran Kinos, it talks about that Nadarim and Nazir are the two Masechtos that don't have the official Rashi and official Tosfos commentaries, because those were not there. And the question is, and that the ability to read them and interpret them is a lot more difficult. It compares it to Talmud Yerushalmi, which doesn't have a full rich Rashi that we have right now, and how that book is kind of a sealed book, and how that without the the interpretations and the commentaries of the Tosavists from Germany and from France, how we have lost, and we have no idea what we've lost, but there definitely is something that has been lost.
Page 425.
Dom nishbachtam, Aima Hamugari, Mishoranim, Man Katsurim, Am Shavi Feshel, Ulibu Mirurim, Kuma Vina Seat Sarima Sorim, Pamecha, Mashuot Harima, Ariv Sichiba Hima, Vikone Harima.
So, Kina 25 is there's something that at least I feel is a little unique about it, because in addition to the gut-wrenching horrors and the lamentations and the sorrow that is on every line, there's also, like, coursing through it, a palpable bitterness and rage that almost feels like this impotent rage that just leaps off the page. And there's something that I've heard multiple times quoted in conjunction with this Kina throughout the years on Tish'a B'Av, and that is there's a Sefer Adoros that talks about the destruction of the Worms community during the Crusades, and it says, why is it that they deserved such a harsh punishment? Why did they deserve this more than other people? And the answer given is because their founders back, in the time of Baicheni, after the Babylonian exile, there was a message sent to them: come back and rebuild Jerusalem with us, rebuild Jerusalem. And their response was, you have your big Jerusalem, we have our little Jerusalem right here. And I never really gotten talking about this on Tish'a B'Av because to me, Tish'a B'Av isn't an intellectual exercise. We're not supposed to, yes, we're supposed to understand that we're supposed to not be comfortable and be always constantly yearning for Mashiach, but like, to me, there's got to be something actionable. I mean, Tish'a B'Av is about having a visceral, real feeling and a real reaction. So, what is it? What's happening here? It's not. I mean, yes, it's that they were comfortable where they were, but what can we take about that other than obviously, like what the rabbi spoke about last night? Don't be comfortable here in Bergen County, but also it's about not being complacent in who you are and where you are. It's knowing that there's a better version of you. Everybody has in their mind a better version of a Jew they can be, and I'm in no way referring to standard practices or normative practice or anything. I'm just whatever it means to you to be Mekayim in the Torah, you can do it better, and you're not because you're complacent with who you are. Everyone does this. It's true. Everyone is comfortable in their little Jerusalem, and they're not trying to be that better person. So the end of this kina talks about we're not allowed to add a day of mourning. So I will increase my mourning today, and I will weep bitter tears. So when you do that, when you read this, I want you to take this rage, this like palpable bitterness that you feel it coming off these pages, and mourn, weep for the Jew you should have been in the past and aren't, you can be today and are not. And then the Kina says, who will wake up me? Wake yourself for the future, for the person you can be in the future, and that's what will ultimately let us slake our thirst for B'Ai Shlishi, is being the best person that can be Mekayim the Torah. Miyatin.
Page 455.
אחתי אנושה ואין אמרתי ומזוררתי על מזור אין לברר אכן אמרתי שאומני אמרר ובכי דימתי על וכי לצרי ובית ישראל ולעם אדוני כי נפלו בחרב.
We'll go right into Kina 26 on page 469. Very briefly, the Kina is based on the Medrash Eicha Rabbah, which describes that at the time of the Churban, Yirmiyahu was told to go to the Maras Machpelah to beg the Avos to ask Hashem for mercy for the exiled children. And Yirmiyahu goes to all the Avos, and all the Avos attempt, and ultimately is the Emos, the Koach of Rachel Imeinu, who is able to get a response from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Kina is all about the Medrash and the dialogue between Klal Yisrael, the Avos and Emos, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on page 469.
שוב עצמי למנוחתכם, עמלי כל מי שעושיכם, שלחתי בבל מענכם, הנני משווה פרדוס ביניכם.
We're going to skip the Kina 31, which we will say to the familiar tune after the introduction on page 550.
So for years, I've had trouble connecting with Kinos. And even when I read through just for the purpose of introducing them, it's hard to really understand the words. It's definitely even harder to connect in general with these kinos for tragedies that happened to people that we don't know, and it's generations past, and we're getting to the point where the Holocaust is probably the last connection we have, and the time is running out even for the people that we can connect to that can still tell us the true stories. Eish Tukad Bikirbi is a different type of kina in that first off, just that it's sung. The tune it's upbeat when we read the lines about B'tzeitzim Mitzrayim, the joyous parts, and then in a more somber tone when we talk about B'tzeitzim Yerushalayim. And there are different levels of expression. So the first level is when something happens and you want to describe it to somebody, you can use your words and you tell them something positive happened, something negative happened. Then there's a level above that. If you're so happy, you might break out into song. That there's no simple words. You go to a wedding and it's all singing to describe the level of happiness. And then there's a third level when there are no words to describe the feelings that you have, whether positive or negative, and that's when you cry. And if we were to get to that level where there are no words to really describe how we feel, which is kind of what our goals are here, we would just be crying. But instead, if we look at most of these kinos, and we're reading through stories, historical perspectives that someone can just try to describe to us, it doesn't really hit home. And when we talk about finally being able to sing something to express the next level of feeling, so there you have to think about exactly what we're really feeling inside as opposed to what we're reading. When you go to, if you were to go to a funeral and someone was going to eulogize a relative, what would be more impactful if they were to get up and tell you stories and describe exactly what their relative was like and their personality, or if they just couldn't describe anything about them because the feelings were too raw and then they would start crying. That's more emotional and more impactful to realize what relationship that person had with the person they're trying to describe. And I actually found it interesting, or very coincidental. I opened up my Kinos this morning, and on the inside cover, the Kinos I grabbed was dedicated by Leah and Rabbi Avi Herzog, and one of them is in honor of Rabbi Yom Tov Herzog. And I was thinking about it related to this Kina of Rabbi Avi's recent experiences of going from the total bottom and loss of his father to elation, and I know how excited he was to make Aliyah. And those are the experiences that we have to bring into these kinos. Our own memories of both positive and negative, whatever we can do to kind of relate to the people we're learning about. And as we again, we're singing, so if you can't focus on the words, just focus on the tune and put it inside you. And of course, the Kina starts H2 Kad Bikirbi. So just to, it's kind of like a build off on something that Dylan was saying, that you should never be complacent with where you are. You could always be better. H2 Kad Bikirbi is an experience, right? How are we ever going to get to the point where we have these feelings that we're so sad that we need to get out of Galus? And how are we ever going to be so excited about when Mashiach comes? The only way to get to that is if there's an Eish, if that fire is burning within you. And the as English, whatever, the words are Eish Kad Bikiri Bahalos Alibi, right? There's a fire burning within me when I remember what happened, right? When I think about it. So it's not even something that we can go back and say. And this kina, if you go through the words, is actually probably one of the easier kinos just to understand because it's very basic. Something happened, great. Something bad happened, okay. So the words are easier to understand. But even if we forget about the words completely, we want to focus on where are our memories? What's the fire burning within us? How are we striving to improve ourselves? And what are we using as motivation to improve ourselves, improve the world, and get to the point where we're going to be ecstatic at the end when we return to Yerushalayim. H2 Kad Bikirbi Behalos Alibi B'Tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Zikenim Ha'ira Leman Askira B'Tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Az Yashir Moshe Shir Lo Yinashe B'Tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Vayikonen Yirmiyah V'Nahan Nehiniah B'Tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Beisi Hiskonan V'Shachan Ha'anan B'Tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim V'Chamas Al Shachna Alai Ka'anana B'Tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Galayam Rama V'Chachoma Kamu B'Tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Zaydonim Shatafu V'Yal Roshi Tzafu B'Tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Tigan Shamayim U'Mitzor Mayim B'Tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim La'ana U'Merorim U'Mayim Hamarim B'Tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Hashkim B'Hareb Zevivos Harchoreb B'Tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Korei Elei Be'al Naros Pavel B'Tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Umarek Bo shochelas lefanai b'tzeisi mimitzrayim v'chereb letusha u'tevach netusha b'tzeisi mirushalayim zevach u'mincha b'shemen hamishcha b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Segulas elekucha katzon latevcha b'tzeisi mirushalayim Chagim b'shabbosos u'movesim b'yosos b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Tanis v'hevel ordof ha'hevel b'tzeisi mirushalayim Tovu halim li'ar'ot egalim b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Ohol yishmelim u'machanos harelim b'tzeisi mirushalayim Yovel u'shmita v'yeresh u'keita b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Machor l'tznisus v'charus l'chrisus b'tzeisi mirushalayim Kapores v'yaron v'yavne zikaron b'tzeisi mimitzrayim V'yavne hakela uchlei ha'abela b'tzeisi mirushalayim Levim v'aharonim v'shivim zikenim b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Noshim u'monim u'mochrim v'konim b'tzeisi mirushalayim Moshe Yirenu v'Aharon Yachenu b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Nebuchadnezzar v'Adrianos Ketzar b'tzeisi mirushalayim Naruch l'chama v'Adonai shama b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Rachach mimenu v'hineinenu b'tzeisi mirushalayim Sisrei parochas b'sidrei marechas b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Chaymaniteches ala esochechas b'tzeisi mirushalayim Olos uzvachim v'ishei nichochem b'tzeisi mimitzrayim B'cherem medukarim b'nei Tzion hayikarim b'tzeisi mirushalayim Hare mikvaos lechavon nikvaos b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Shirikos usruos lekalon uzvaos b'tzeisi mirushalayim Tzion hazaha v'hamsha v'raha b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Ushlach hanezer v'yafas ha'ezer b'tzeisi mirushalayim Kedusha u'nubuwa u'chor Adonai nira b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Nigala u'mora v'ruach hatuma b'tzeisi mirushalayim Rina v'yeshua v'chazos rosa terua b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Zakas olam v'nakas hala b'tzeisi mirushalayim Shulchan u'nora v'chalil l'ktorah b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Elul v'soeva u'fesel u'matzeba b'tzeisi mirushalayim Torah u'srua v'chochlei hachemda b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Sason v'simcha v'nas yagon v'anacha v'shuvi l'Yerushalayim.
We're going to now just recite the Kinot. We're going to shift our focus to the Tzion Kinot. So Kinot 36. Tzion Alot Tish'ali. Shalom Asirayach. It's the next chunk of Kinot. Focus on what was of Yerushalayim. To know what was helps us understand what is no longer. On page 555, Tzion Halot Tish'ali.
ואנחנו עכשיו בלוהי ואשרי אנו זכרי קריביש כל מחצרי חשרי מחכה ויגיע ויראה לא תרח ויבקו עליו שחרייך לראות בטובת בחירייך ולעלות בשמחתך ושובך אלי עמד נעורייך.
41, page 591.
So, Kina 41, Sha'ali Srufa Va'esh, Lishlom Avelayich, describes the burning of 24 cartloads of manuscripts from the Talmud, from the Gemara. And of course, we all know that this was at a time when there was no printing press. These were all handwritten on parchment, priceless, and that in and of itself is tragic. But I think Bigadol in a larger context, just the notion that we are the people of the book. These are our texts, and when there isn't a temple to destroy, what does that leave other than the people? Your manuscripts, what you consider the text that you hold most dear, the knowledge. And this year, I thought about this kina actually earlier in the year when we heard that the cathedral Notre Dame was burning, and I wasn't really sure at first how I felt about that because these manuscripts were burnt very purposefully within view of Notre Dame, which was at the time near completion. And it wasn't like they just decided to do this in a day. It was a very long process that began with a disputation. These are well documented, not just in Jewish sources, but historically. It's a very familiar storyline we all know. We made mention of Donin is the apostate, the person who was a student at the yeshiva in Paris. He disagreed with then the Rosh Yeshiva, Rebbe Chiel, on many points, and eventually was excommunicated because he was denying the validity of the Gemara. So it's no surprise that after he took some time off to go make a name for himself as a Christian and as a crusader, that he denied, he accused the Talmud of being heretical. He had to prove what he was saying. There were some who opposed him, but eventually it was considered serious enough to warrant a disputation. Four rabbis, Rebbe Chiel among them, were called to defend the Talmud. Pretty much it was a foregone conclusion, but it was decreed that all copies of the Talmud must be burnt. And the town square in Paris, which is now I think a hotel, but at the time there were no buildings between that and across the river. You could see the cathedral. I just want to read the end of an article. I think that sums it up pretty well. What burning the Talmud in that particular place meant. The smoke of the burning Talmud rose in 1242 against the Gothic in full possession of its grand manner, the western facade of Notre Dame of Paris. This tremendous sculpted wall, the most famous of postcard images, dates from 1200 to 1250, the classic instant of triumph. Flanking the central door stand two queens, rivals across the centuries. The radiant figure on the left is the Church Victorious, crowned and imperial, and holding a chalice which is nothing less than the Holy Grail. The queen on the right is posed in defeat, her staff broken in several places, her eyes covered by a coiling serpent, her signs of royalty removed or shattered. A reversed tablet of the law falling from her hand shows that she is the synagogue. The statues at Paris are modern, the work of the 19th century restorer, but at Strasbourg are two queens in all their original beauty. The church is magnificent. The synagogue is amazing. We may stand before them for many hours, trying to decide which is the more lovely, and the decision will be purely a subjective matter of taste, as it should be. But as we look at the bandaged eyes of the captive queen, and study the exquisite proportions of her broken staff, we shall not fail to realize the utter grace and majesty of her defeat. That, as we were saying before, when we're mourning the burning of the Talmud, which is an idea, but the letters are there for us to catch as they ascend from the burning parchment. Um, the idea of burning the Talmud in full view of Notre Dame was their way of saying, "Ha, like we're here and you're not." And the artistry, the artistic, the imagery of the synagogue, the Jew being put down, being broken. It's a very strong message on the part of the artist, trying to say that we're greater and you should know your place. But on the one, I'm not saying it's okay that someone else's house of worship should be burnt. I think that we are all too familiar with the feeling that comes with that. But at the same time, echoing my rabbi growing up, I think that it's important to have a long memory, to know what happened and why it happened, and to try to think about the meaning and the significance for us today. That these are Vigata Bo Yomam V'Laila. These are our manuscripts, and now, thank God, we have a printing press. I don't think people at that time would believe that there would be a day when, if you get married, you get an entire set of shas. Like, these are books that we have. Thank God, these are teachings that we learn, and we make them our own.
In modern times, we tend to compartmentalize tragedy. If you look on the Gregorian calendar, see September 11th commemoration, November is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. You also have Kristallnacht. In the spring, you have 27 of Nisan, you have Yom HaShoah. But Tisha B'Av represents the one time that we draw together the tragedy of the Shoah, along with all of the other tragedies and perils we have faced as a people. And it's interesting the fact that we sort of wrap up our keynotes with the recitation of several that have been added in recent years, including one by Rav Schwab, another by the Baba Rebbe. And having grown up in a community of Holocaust survivors, I was sensitized really at a young age what the Holocaust was, a little bit about their experiences, although looking back, many of them only shared limited parts of their experiences. But I have very vivid recollections of the Balkore of our shul, of blessed memory, Yaakov ben Avram. He was known by Jack or Yankel, and he was that guy in shul that everybody, all the kids gravitated towards. He didn't necessarily give out candy, but he had that magnetic personality. And he stood at about 5'3", so a man short in height, but a giant of a soul. And I remember what was always distinct about Yankel were his arms. His arms, his biceps, looked like tree trunks. And I'd always remark, and I would ask him, and he would tell me, I was a butcher. I chop meat all day, so naturally my arms got long. I remember around the time of my bar mitzvah, he pulled me aside. He said, I want to tell you the truth about why my arms are so large. He said that the Nazis would put a boulder on his shoulder and make him run up and down concrete staircases day in and day out. He said I would do it on my right side, I would do it on my left side. And that's how my arms got big as they got. He said, I also want you to know what would happen at the end if they wanted us to shower. He said, in the dead of winter, they would strip us naked, spray us with a hose. I asked him, you survived? He said, I have no idea. He said, somehow, some way, everybody around me died, and I managed to survive. Since that experience, when I was 13 years old, I've always thought that the Holocaust is not just something that we leave from the survivors, but we have to perpetuate. We have, especially now as the youngest survivors are pushing 90, we too have to commemorate each year, not just at the same time every day, but the Holocaust, Tish'a B'Av is all the more important. I want to share a little story about someone else I know. Individual who's living, thank God. His name is Edwin Mossberg. I encourage you at the appropriate time to look up Mr. Mossberg, Mosberg on YouTube. Mr. Mossberg is now rescued in excess of 18 Sifrei Torah from war-torn Europe. Apparently, there are still Sifrei Torah that are sitting in boiler rooms, basements. He's managed to bring many over to Kent. Some were irreparable, others could be. Now there are in excess of 18 Sifrei Torah being used in yeshivot, synagogues throughout the United States. Even a picture of a Torah that was donated to Stephen Spielberg. So in darkness there is light. We remember that we also look to build our future based on what was torn away. Korban Europa, to me, there's no better day to commemorate that than the day that we commemorate the Korban Bayis Rishon.
I want to just introduce this kina with the question that we're going to sing this kina, famously to the well-known tune, upbeat tune. And Tish'a B'Av's not over. It's not even Chatzot yet. So how are we able to sing? How are we able to have a positive perspective? So I came across an interview this past week of the mother of Ori Ansbacher, who you may remember back in February. A young girl was taking a walk in the forests of Yerushalayim and was raped and murdered by a terrorist. And Ori's mother was asked whether she ever had seen, they caught the perpetrator, and she was asked in the interview whether she ever had seen the face of the murderer. And she said no. She said, I have other children, and I have a responsibility to educate them and raise them with hope. And I don't want to look at this pure evil because I want to be able to continue to be mechanech my other children with hope. And I watched a number of her friends put out a song, which I was debating whether to play it in the shul, but I'd more comfortable everyone go home and watch the song in the privacy of your home. But I want to read you the powerful poem that Ori Ansbacher left us. And it's chilling. We'll read it both in Hebrew and in English. She writes, Asi, shehe olamech olam shel shalom, shalom olamim, zichri et halma sha'at, et hadvash shehaya lifnei sheradu bach, nichsi la'atzmech mechadash, et hamitikut hazu שהייתה שלך, החייי את העלמה, ובראי לך עולם, עולם של שלום, לפני המסע מתן שלך עם עצמך, עם אהובך, לפני הסכמים והפרות המלחמות, עשי לך שלום בתוכך. Which translates as act, so your world will be a world of peace, peace everlasting. Remember the young woman you are, the honey that was before they drew it, and you out. Reclaim for yourself anew that sweetness that was your own. Revive the girl and create a world of peace before negotiating with yourself and your beloved, before the treaties and the violations and the battles. Make peace within yourself. Such a powerful poem, powerful song. You can see on YouTube, which almost with premonition, an innocent young 19-year-old girl violated, desecrated in the most vulgar way, writing a poem not to forget the young woman that you are, the honey that was before they drew it and you out, to reclaim for yourself anew that sweetness. Despite the fact that we have been subjected to so much hardship and difficulty throughout our history, this poem sums it up. Sums it up that we can't become numb, can't become crass, coarse. We have to maintain a sense of dignity and act in a dignified way even when we've dealt with such this barbarism throughout our history. I also saw quotes from Dvir Sorek's father that said Mr. Sorek later told reporters that his son Dvir was tested. Again, this Dvir Sorek was killed this past Wednesday. He was tested 2 months ago in karate and did not get such a high grade because the teacher said he was doing the moves well, but he had no murder in his eyes. He had light in his eyes, Mr. Sorek added, and someone with murder in his eyes took him. And perhaps we end our recitation with Kinot with a positive, upbeat tune of Eli Tzion Ve'areha, because despite all the tragedy and difficult themes that we've been reading all morning, we can't leave today with murder in our eyes. We're reminded of the poem of the Tzaddiket Ori Ansbacher Hashem Yimkom Damav. Remember the young woman you are, the honey that was before they drew it out, and reclaim for yourselves that sweetness. Kina 45, please stand. Eli Tzion ve'areha, Yemo isha betzireha, V'chivzu lach hagurasa, Al ba'al ne'ureha, Ale armon asher nutan, V'ash matzon adareha, V'al bias mechar fe'el, V'tot mikdash chadareha, Ale galus mishar se'el, Mani meshir zemareha, V'al damam asher shufach, Mo me ye'oreha, Ale hegyon mecholeha, Asher damam be'areha, V'hava ad asher shamim, Uvitul sanhedreha, Ale zivche demideha, Uvidyone v'choreha, V'al chilul kelei Umizbach ketoreha, Ale tapeh melacheha, B'nei David gevireha, V'al yov yom asher chashach, V'eis saru kesareha, Ale kevod asher galah, V'eis korban devireha, V'al lochetz asher lachatz, Sam sakim chagoreha, Ale mochatz v'ro mako, Asher hu nezireha, V'al nifutz elei selah, Ola leha ne'areha, Ale simcha oiveha, V'sachekam al shevareha, V'al inoi b'nei chorin, Nediveha tehoreha, Ale pesha asher asa, Zelo derech ashureha, Ve'al tivo kehaleha, Shesu veha shechoreha, Ale kolo v'charpeha, Ve'es rabu v'gareha, Ve'al riksha v'gadbeha, Mishkan chatzera, Ale V'kamei mitzera, V'al tachan yitzav kula, Yishovu shma amarea, Eli Tzion ve'area, Yemo isha b'tzirea, V'kivsu lach hagurasak, Al ba'al ne'ureha. Ashrei on page 641. Ashrei